Okay, so we're going to have a little look at a type of genetic cross that involves sex linkage. To understand how sex linkage works, we need to go back and look at the sex chromosomes. So what we've got here is the X chromosome and the Y chromosome having undergone DNA replication. We can tell because they're coiled up, held together by their centromeres. So we've got a pair of sister chromatids of the X, which has obviously come from mum, and we've got a pair of sister chromatids of Y, which has obviously come from dad. Okay, so remember, in humans, all women have XX and men have XY, which means that the sperm either carries an X chromosome or a Y chromosome, but the egg cell always carries one of the two X's, the X that a female got from her mum or the X that the female got from her dad. What we need to look at here is how much bigger the X chromosome is than the Y. In actual fact, in reality, it's even bigger a difference than I'm showing you here. So when we're talking about sex linkage, what we're talking about is inheritance of a gene that is carried on this lower portion of the X chromosome. So if we think about any gene that's on this section here in my diagram, okay, whatever you get from your mum, if you're a boy, you're going to end up showing that characteristic in your phenotype because there is nothing here to cancel it out, okay? So really good examples of this are red-green colour blindness, okay, which is inherited seen far more often in males than in females. And the other one is a blood disorder called haemophilia, where particular clotting factors that should be in the blood plasma are not there, and that means that when you cut yourself, your blood becomes exposed to oxygen in the air. The clotting factors ought to trigger the reaction that causes you to clot and form a scab. And for haemophiliacs, that is not happening. That doesn't take place. And it's because both of these two characteristics are controlled by a gene somewhere here on the X chromosome. Okay? So if they inherit a recessive copy, both of these are recessive inherited disorders. If they inherit a recessive copy of either of these, there's nothing on the Y chromosome to override that. So they will end up with a disorder with one recessive allele. Okay? So for a female, she could have a copy on her X and a copy on her other X. So it doesn't matter if one's recessive as long as the other one's dominant. Whereas if you're a male, you've got a copy on your X and you have no copy on the Y. Now, the way we show that when we're drawing out genetic crosses, which you'll see on the next screen when I clean this off in a minute, we have to write in the XX and the XY first, okay? And then, just like we did with codominance, where we attach the letter as a superscript onto another letter, we're going to attach it onto the X chromosome or not onto the Y chromosome in this case. So if we were looking at haemophilia, for example, we're going to use a big H to indicate that you have normal clotting. We're going to use a little h to indicate that you do not have the clotting factors in your blood. So this female could be big A, X big H, X little h. She'd be a carrier of haemophilia, but she wouldn't be affected by it because she's got a big H, and that means that her blood has got the clotting factors in it. If she passed that little h onto her son, and this little h here was passed on here, then he would have X little h, and then the Y has nothing on it. We don't write anything at all here, nothing. We just leave it as a Y. So that would be X little hy, whereas this would be X big H, X little h. Here, we'd end up seeing a sufferer because they don't have the clotting factors. Even though they've only got one copy of the recessive allele, you can inherit a recessive disorder with just one copy if it's sex-linked, because there's nothing at all on the Y chromosome here to cancel that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this, clear off the board, and then we'll have a look at both red-green coloured blindness and haemophilia as examples of this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the example of Mr. Belshire, who has red-green colour blindness. I know not lots of you know him. So he definitely has X, Y. So we think about that first. And then we need to think about what letters we're going to use for this. So I'm going to use an R for this. He must have a little r, okay? His sister, because he's got a twin sister, obviously has X, X. We can think about whether he has a sister who has X big R, X big R, or X big R, X little r. At the moment, we don't know what his sister has for her second allele. All we know is that she doesn't have red-green colour blindness. So she must have one copy of the X big R. And at the moment, I'm going to leave it as an underscore, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little think about his particular family tree and how that might look. Okay, so here's what we've got going on. We've got Mr. Belcher here, who has X little r because he has red-green colour blindness, and he has a Y because he's male, and there's nothing on the Y because we don't draw anything on the Y. He has two sisters, neither of whom has red-green colour blindness. So both of them have got XX, and they've both got at least one big R, and at the moment we're putting an underscore in because we just don't know if we can fill in any more information than this. This is how we work on a family tree. So obviously he's got his two parents, he's got his mum, and he's got his dad. And neither of them had red-green colour blindness. So this helps us. We know that his dad didn't have red-green colour blindness, so his dad must be X big R Y. Nothing on the Y. And we know that he doesn't have red-green colour blindness. So we know that the R that he does have, that he inherited from his mum, must be a capital R. So that means that we know Mr. Belcher must have got this little r from his mum. So his mum must be big R because she's unaffected, and little r because she's passed it on to him. Can we fill in any more about his sisters? No, we can't. We know that they've got an X big R, but that could have come from the dad or from the mum. What we don't know is what they got for their other one. So unless we know about any children that they had, which I don't, and whether those children had red-green colour blindness, we can't fill in any more about this. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to clean off again. I'm going to show you how we do an inheritance here. Okay. So what we're going to have a look at is we're going to take Mr. Belcher with his X little r Y, and then we're also going to look at the fact that he has two children, both male, neither of whom has red-green colour blindness. So we're going to have a look at the fact that Mr. Belcher must have had children with somebody who was XX, obviously, and they must have had a big R, and we don't know about their other one. right now. So what we're going to have a look at is what are the possible alleles here. So he could pass on his X with a little r, or he could pass on his Y. Yeah, and remember, nothing attached to the Y. What we're going to assume for now is that the mum of Mr. Belcher's 2 children is X big R, X big R. Okay, so she could pass on either one of those, and we can put them into a Punnett square. Let's put her at the top and Mr. Belcher down the side. So there is his X little r and a Y, and here is her X big R, X big R. Recombine them and we can see that we've got X big R, X little r. Yeah. X big R, X little r. Those two are the same. And then we've got X big R, Y, and X big R, Y. Okay? We know that he didn't have any daughters, so actually we can ignore that row. This is the row of opportunities for him to have had a son, both of whom have inherited a big R from their mum and haven't inherited the little r from their dad because they can't. They have to pick up the Y from their dad. It will be impossible for him to have sons who inherited red-green colour blindness from him. Okay? The only way he's going to pass on that X little r is to a female child, not to a male child. The male children are all getting the Y. So if either of his boys had red-green colour blindness, they would have had to inherit it from their mum. She would have had to have had a big R and a little r. Okay? It's extremely rare for females to have red-green colour blindness. I have taught one person who did have red-green colour blindness. She didn't realise, and she was in year 11, and she was using a pen that was turquoise when I'd said use purple. And she said, it is purple. And the entire table just went, no it isn't. And she hadn't even realised up to that point. Her dad had red-green colour blindness, and her mum must have also been a carrier. So let's have a wipe off of the board and a quick look at how that would work. Okay, so have a look at this one. What we've got going on here is the mum must be a carrier. She must be X big R, X little r. Dad must be X little r, Y because he has the condition. The gametes possibly here would be X big R in a circle, X little r in a circle, X little r in a circle, or Y in a circle. So we can Punnett square this and look at the chances of that pupil having ended up with red-green colour blindness as a female, which is very unusual. So we can see I've put dad along the top here and mum down the side. So we could have X big R, X little r. Tell me about this person. They're female, first of all. Do they have red-green colour blindness? No. Are they a carrier? Yes, because of that. Then we've got X big R, Y. Tell me about this person. They're male, and they don't have red-green colour blindness because they've inherited a dominant allele. Then we can have X little r, X little r. This is the female who has got the condition. She's got red-green colour blindness. That's the pupil that I taught. And then we've got X little r, Y. This would be a male with red-green colour blindness. Okay? So the chances of that couple having had this child is 1 in 4. Okay? So 0.25 as a probability. Okay? Haemophilia works in exactly the same way. It would just be a different letter attached. So for instance, we could write haemophilia. We could have X with a big H, X with a little h, indicating normal clotting of blood and the haemophilia clotting of blood. So anybody who inherits haemophilia as a male will have that combination as their alleles and their genotype.